Hi, I'm Rachel Tupper-Paley, Digital Editorial Director at Wine Enthusiast magazine. Today, we're talking with wine enthusiast writer-at-large Reggie Solomon, our reviewer for wines from the Loire Valley, Beaujolais, southern coastal Spain, Israel, Asia, and more. Reggie has obviously described more than his fair share of bottles over the course of his decade-plus career in wine. That also means he's encountered pretty much every wine descriptor and term you can think of, and probably a few more. The thing about wine terms is that, like the rest of the English language, they change over time. Some fall into favor, others out of it. We wanted to know what terms are giving Reggie the ick these days, and why. Hey Reggie, thanks so much for being here today.
Oh, thanks, Rachel. I appreciate it. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
So before we get into it, let's just talk first and foremost, why do people care about outdated terms? Why do terms get out of date in the first place? Is that a good thing? Is it a bad thing? What are your thoughts on that?
That's a great question. For me, language is very important because our relationship with language changes over time. When you're small and you're a child, you have a certain relationship with language that's different when you're an adult. And it's sort of similar with wine. Wine evolves, the way we approach wine, the way we engage with wine evolves. And so I think it's natural that our language follows the evolution. That's just a natural part of time.
I think that's totally true. I think too, as wine writers, we encounter so many descriptors and sometimes they make you feel something that's good and sometimes you're like, "Really? Okay." A big reason why we're even talking about this is because our tasting director, Anna Christina Corballis, wrote a viewpoint in a recent print issue about the terms masculine and feminine. And her position was that they are outdated terms. We should not be using them anymore. Do you have thoughts about that?
I have huge thoughts on that, and I absolutely agree. There's no need to gender wine. Wine doesn't have a gender, it has a taste. And oftentimes people use the words masculine and feminine as a shortcut when they should be really unpacking what they mean. Wines that are strong, you would think like masculine means strong, but you can have wines that are very soft and that are very broad and brooding. These words no longer serve a purpose because they just aren't exact enough.
I think that that's really true. Like, you can have, you know, a quote unquote feminine wine that, is like refined and soft, but also like has some oomph. And also just like I think about it the way I think about like people describing drinks as girly. It's like, must we? Must we do that? I mean, I'm a woman and I drink plenty of whiskey, plenty masculine stuff. So it's like it just feels like it's like a relic of another time, and it feels a little lazy to your point, and it also turns me off. Like, I think at the end of the day, like, if your goal in describing something is to, like, compel someone to drink something, right away you've turned me off. So it's not only is it not describing things, but you've made me angry as well. So I just think that it's not useful, and I think also talking about, like, lazy terms that are too broad and don't actually help convey what something tastes like, I think that leads you down a path to a lot of other terms. I think that one term that when we were discussing, bringing you on the podcast, you brought up the word smooth. Tell me your thoughts on that.
Yeah, smooth is one of those words that, for novice wine drinkers, it's a word that's overused. It makes sense because people drink a wine. Let's say you're having a red wine and people taste it and they think smooth. But what does smooth actually mean? Are we talking about texture or are we talking about like how it went down? Like we need to unpack words. So smooth, I would encourage people to describe things as velvety or, silky in texture. Smooth doesn't tell me anything. I don't know anything about this wine. You've used the word smooth because I guess it didn't taste like whiskey and didn't go down smooth. So, it's just a descriptor that actually means nothing.
Right. When I think of smooth, I'm going like alcohol content. Like, it's not like I'm not it's not like a fiery in my throat, you know? But that's not how that term is meant to be used. I think that's really interesting. What are some other words, like, that you would put in that category as being, like, so broad as to be unhelpful?
Yeah, jammy and fruity. Now these are words that conjure something in the mind, but these words are really sort of broad categories. If you're using the words like jammy and fruity, you need to go a little bit further. And I think it's okay to say something, these are jammy flavors, but you need to go further and say, of what? Are we talking about strawberry jam? Are we talking about blackberry jam? We need to continue to do the work because jammy doesn't give us enough to know what the predicted experience is that the writing is supposed to capture. And so, jammy and fruity, I think you can say something is fruity, but then you have to go further, including which fruits. So again, like language can be lazy and we want to do a work because we want people to be able to picture something in their mind. And if you're picturing strawberry jam and I'm picturing blackberry jam, then the person writing the article isn't communicating clearly enough so that what they tasted is what the reader is understanding.
Right. It's like the thing that it makes me think of, it's like somebody drinking something like, "I'm getting notes of grapes. It's grape-like." It's like, that's unhelpful.
Exactly.
I mean, I think too, it's like wine writing has 2 purposes. The first one is the most obvious one, which is to convey to somebody who is not drinking that wine what it tastes like. But it's also supposed to make you feel something. It's supposed to be like poetry and art and, it's supposed to be evocative, which for the record, I buy into because that's the way my brain is. I like those things. I see the romance in it. But it can't be at the expense of the first thing. Like, it still needs to be like, it has to function correctly. Like, you need to be able to convey what something tastes like to somebody who is not drinking it.
No, exactly. The one thing, and people ask me all the time is, "Hey, Reggie, did you like this wine?" And I'm like, "Well, actually, that's not my first responsibility. My first responsibility is to be able to describe the wine in a way that somebody who likes it could like it." So for
Mhm.
me, I am not I don't drink a lot of Cabernet, but I will tell you whenever I am reviewing a Cabernet, I give that wine so much more space and describe it because I really want the person who loves Cabernet to be able to love it. And so, I have to use words that excite the reader to want the wine that they would like that I wouldn't necessarily like. So language is really important because it separates our personal feelings from the actual thing at hand, which is the wine.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on terms like barnyard?
So, so that's a great question. So if I say the term barnyard, like, I mean, what kind of aromas are you like conjuring up? Anything?
I'm gonna go with manure. Manure.
Yeah. I mean, that's not a very, like, satisfying smell or taste. Words like barnyard, rustic, these are words that were used, I would say, like, maybe 20 to 50 years ago in wine writing. And, I think there was a usefulness then, and I'm thinking more about, like, wines from Europe, from, like, Spain and France when the weather, was cooler, and some of the wines had qualities that resembled some of these descriptors. With climate change, the way things are changing, these descriptors, you're not finding a lot of barnyard out there anymore because wines are riper. They're not highly acidic the way they used to be. And so, as climate has changed, the way we describe things needs to evolve. So, yeah, I don't use barnyard because I don't know that anybody, like 3 people in a room would agree, like, what barnyard smells like, so the word is not precise.
What do you think in like a today's term, barnyard, the flavor that as it was, 2 decades ago, what word would you use to describe that whatever it was getting at?
That's a great question, and, I use words like dried hay bale,
Mm.
or wet hay bale, or, dew-dusted forest floor. Like, I would use things that create an image in people's minds that evoke, like, a reaction.
Uh-huh.
And
That
so
isn't poop. That is not
yes.
a poop adjacent reaction.
Yeah, because yeah, I mean, that first thing I think of is poop, like, barnyard what's in a barnyard? Well, the things that hang around the barn. Uh, so, yes, the
It's
word isn't
definitely
precise.
it's not precise, and one also has to wonder, like, who thought that was a good idea, you know? Like, although, don't you think that there was, like, a moment in wine writing where, you know, it evoked a strong reaction from me? Maybe that was the point, like, it wasn't the fact that it was a negative reaction was, like, less important. It was sort of shocking, and it got my attention. Do you agree, like, there was a little bit of that happening for a long while?
Yeah, I mean, I agree, and maybe during the years where there were more family farms, small family farms, like and people went to them and actually bought their stuff from family farms, people had a relationship with this word that simply doesn't exist now.
Right.
So yeah, yeah, no, I agree with you wholeheartedly.
That's true. In my Brooklyn existence, I don't encounter very many barns, so I'm not I'm not familiar with the whole range of smells you could associate with a barnyard.
Which gets to actually inclusivity. If you're using barnyard, you're using a word that's not inclusive. And the one thing that I think that wine writing should definitely do is try to bring as many people in as possible. And words like barnyard, like push people away. If you don't know what that means, it makes you feel as though this writing isn't for you. And so I think we our writing has to be inclusive and the words we use have to really sort of bring people in. And I try not to use too many words that aren't inclusive. I want to be precise, but I also want to bring people in.
Totally. What other words do you have strong feelings about?
Cat pee is one of them. So cat pee is a word that has traditionally been used to describe Sauvignon Blanc.
Oh my.
And it's traditionally been used to describe Sauvignon Blanc from the Loire Valley because the grapes did not ripen always at certain points of history. They dependably ripen now due to climate change, and there was this sort of quality to it that was sort of cat pee reminiscent. But not many people know what cat pee tastes like, including myself, and so
And thank goodness for that. Thank goodness for that.
Yes. So, this word is one that I will never use. I do not see people using it. I do see some writers from the UK using this term, because I think that they still use this term just like they use the term gooseberry, which nobody knows. Like here in the US, nobody knows what a gooseberry tastes like or smells like. So, there could be regional differences in the way that we use language. And since we're a US based publication, I use words that people here will understand. And so maybe there are a lot more cats in the UK and they like know what that means.
That's so funny. But also, don't you think, like, I mean, is it used in a negative context? Is it a negative
No,
thing?
no, it is not. It's used like, oh, there are hints of cat pee and, flowers. And I'm like, I'm not
Oh.
thinking about anything past cat pee. The fact that it was flower covered was
You
not
lost
gonna
me. Lost me at cat pee.
exactly.
Oh my
So
gosh.
I've retired that. I think, I don't see that used a lot in US wine writing, but it does still exist out there outside our borders.
Oh, wow. I feel like you must have strong opinions on other stuff. Hit me with them.
Old world versus new world. This is actually something even the Court of Master Sommeliers decided to retire these words. So these words, old world and new world, used to refer to sort of physical locations. So old world were sort of basically Europe. So France, Spain, Italy, countries that are all European countries. And basically anything that wasn't that was considered New World. So South Africa, Argentina, Australia, the US. And so at one time in history, the Old World used to produce wines that were higher in acidity. These wines had a certain character, but climate change has really evened things out. And so has improvements in winemaking just the technology of winemaking. It is possible to make a light-bodied red wine in California just as it is in the Loire Valley, and it's possible to make a bold, muscular Bordeaux as well as a muscular, bold Napa Valley cab. And so these terms, old world and new world, used to be shortcuts to talk about wine styles, but that's no longer the case. New world wines can be just as elegant and light bodied. And so these terms really don't tell us anything anymore. That's why we retired them.
Also, New World is like it's so big, and what like South Africa is so far from California. Like the idea that they could be encompassed in one term is a little
Yeah.
crazy to me.
Yeah. That's it's some people will still use this word, but most really intelligent wine writing doesn't. It has some also has some colonialist, uh,
Yeah.
tinges to it that don't bode well.
Yeah, it's like, must we? Can we do this in 2025 now, please?
No,
Um,
exactly. Another word that comes to mind is, I don't use it anymore, but people used to use it, I would say, like, maybe 10 years ago. It's glue glue,
mm,
which is, it's a French term, and it was it refers to wines that are sort of light and easy drinking, and so, many people don't know what glue glue is. It's a word that's not inclusive. We're already using, another language, so we're already telling people who didn't take high school French that they're not gonna have access to this word. So, I just say the wines are light and easy drinking, or, this wine is perfect for a Tuesday.
In addition to producing world class content, did you know that Wine Enthusiast is also the premier shopping destination for wine lifestyle products? Just visit our shop at wineenthusiast.com, where you'll discover an amazing assortment of unique quality items guaranteed to enhance your wine experience. From glassware and accessories to thousands of unique wine gifts, it's like a toy store for wine lovers. And don't forget about protecting your wine. We are the nation's leading retailer of wine storage products. Whether you have 600 bottles, desire a wine cabinet, or a custom designed wine room, our free wine storage consultations will help you find the perfect wine fit for your collection. Visit wineenthusiast.com today. We bring wine to life. Brought to you by the Wine Enthusiast Shop.
I don't necessarily prescribe to this line of thought, but I wanna bring it up as a devil's argument that, like,
Yeah.
a word like glue glue, it's kind of like, again, to an English speaker, it kinda sounds like a silly word, and that's, one could say maybe that's enough to, like, bring people in. Do you think that there's any truth to that? Or is it that just, like, in a noisy wine bar, you don't, like, you're not your mind is not in the place to, like, accept like, listen to someone explain to you the meaning of it and what it's supposed to sound like, and it's just, like, you're not in a place in your mind or even body to be charmed by that in that scenario. Do you have thoughts on that?
I mean, I think that is relevant. I mean, it is sort of fun to say the word glue glue, but, just because it's fun doesn't mean you should do it. Um, glue glue, I think it feels fun to say, but there are
Right.
other fun words that I don't say a lot because they just don't people don't know what they mean, and I wanna bring people to wine and not make them feel like it's not for them.
I think it gets back to the heart of this debate, which we keep bringing up, which is that, like, wine language has 2 purposes. The first one is to, like, tell people what something tastes like, what the experience of drinking it is like. And the second one is to, like, inspire them and make them feel something. But if that second one is at the expense of the first, is it should you still be using it, you know? I think glue glue, like, to me, like, it does sound like funny and, poetic, but do people know what it means? Is it helping them understand the wine better? I think these are important questions to ask.
Well, I'll give you an example. If I use the word botrytize, people might know what botrytis is. They might know,
Mhm.
what the process is, but some people might not. And so I
Right.
don't use that word because it's not a useful shortcut for people who don't know what botrytis is. So I would rather
Right.
talk about like, this has like fermented grape skin aromas that are, you know, smell like raisin fruit. Like that is something that people might visualize, but you know, botrytize, no.
I mean, similarly, like, noble rot, like, that's a term that requires an explanation, and if
Correct.
it's a term that requires an explanation, maybe you need to reevaluate if why you're using it, you know?
Yeah. So what do you think about a term like meaty?
So, I mean, I think that there is an argument that it's, like, too broad, it's not descriptive enough, it maybe is not inclusive to people who don't eat meat. That said, sometimes, like, a wine feels meaty, right?
I listen, I agree. I think it is hard to drink wines from the Rhone Valley and not think like meatiness. Uh,
Mhm.
but, I would go a little further when I wouldn't always use meaty without qualification, but,
Mm.
is it meaty like beef jerky? Is it meaty like a fresh rib roast? Is it meaty like a freshly grilled steak or medium rare steak? Like, I wanna know what kind of meat it is.
Mm.
I'm curious. So, as long as you're not vegetarian, you could use the word meaty, but try to use it, like, very sparingly.
Mm. Do you prefer terms like umami or savory, or do you not like those words?
I like savory. I don't use umami enough because I don't know that people understand what it means, so I will often
Mm.
use, uh, dried mushroom or something that people would think, "Oh, okay." That's like I describe the thing that a mommy is supposed to describe rather than using the shortcuts. So, you know, I'm always trying not to use the shortcuts. I use them too. I'm not like I am guilty of that, but I try not to make the writing mostly shortcuts. I want the writing to actually do the work.
I think that's a really wonderful way to think about it. One other thing, it's not quite well, it's a little bit off topic from what we're talking about, but I do think it's spiritually linked. We wrote this story a few months ago. The piece was that natural wine democratized quote unquote wine speak, but doesn't make any sense. And in this article, the writer Maggie Hennessy mentioned a wine bar that describes a wine as tasting like a quote early Karen O song. And to that, I would say, what does that mean? I don't know what that means. That is
It
not helpful to me.
and listen, I wholeheartedly agree with you, and that's, like, people who write and say, "This wine reminded me like an old college boyfriend." Well, I don't know who your old college boyfriend
Was
is.
he nice? I don't know. He
I
could
don't
have been
know.
nice. Was
Did he
he
wear
mean? I
cologne?
don't know. Right. Like,
Exactly. So, I try to make things I try to depersonalize the descriptions so that I can maximize the amount of people who would have had a similar experience.
right. I mean, honestly, I do think that wine writing at the end of the day is writing, and it suffers from the same things that all writing suffers from, which is that, like, sometimes it feels indulgent. Sometimes it feels like the reader asks the question, like, who is this for? Is this for you? And you're working some stuff out personally? Or is it for a reader who, on that you've never met before? Like, who is this for? Like, I think that wine writing, people forget that, like, yes, it's beautiful. Yes, it's romantic. Wine is beautiful and romantic, but wine writing at the end of the day is service journalism. Like, it needs to help somebody. And if it's also beautiful, that's great. But it needs to help somebody. And if it's not helping, what are you doing?
Yeah, I read a lot of wine reviews because I am always looking for language that I'm not using naturally and trying to expand my vocabulary. So, I depend on my colleagues because I might use words like wet river stone, but I look for other ways to say the same concept without using those same words. And so that's one of the beauties of language. I can communicate a similar sentiment without using the same vocabulary and still communicate. And so I think that's the beautiful thing about wine writing is it can it can invite people in and encourage them to stay, and it can be flexible and it can be malleable. And I think all these things are great. And at the end of the day, these words should excite people, whether it's an article or whether it's a wine review. I want the person to be excited about whatever we're talking about. So that's my goal.
And that is the power of language, you know? I'm curious, what are some terms that are maybe newer to you in your writing that you've picked up from elsewhere and you're like, "Ooh, I love that. I wanna use that."
That's a good question. So
Sorry to put you on the
sometimes,
spot.
no, no, this is good. But sometimes people have used the word, I don't know how to pronounce. I think it's confiture or it's a C. It's a word that's supposed to be jam, like describe jam. And when I hear the word, sometimes I say, when I read the word, I say, that's a elegant word. But then I think, I had to go look that up. So if I'm the wine writer having to look it up, I don't want to force my reader to have to go look it up. But there are words that I'm always like, I take the old issues of Wine Enthusiast and I go through the reviews and I underline them. And so for the hour before I go in to taste, I will underline these words. And then when I go in to taste, I force myself to expand my vocabulary by at least 5 new words in reviews that I write that day. So, there are lots of words. There's lots of like twist of phrases, but I learned a lot from my colleagues
Mm.
and my other tasters.
'Cause everybody has a different way to describe the same thing, and I think that's where wine writing can be very beautiful, where especially if, you're reading a review and somebody else is describing something that is familiar to you, but describing it in a different way, it helps you see that flavor in a different light, in a different way, and that's where language is so amazing, and that's why, like, it's easy to have, like, a conversation about, like, "Ah, don't use this word because 'cause you're an old fuddy-duddy if you use this word." But it's like, no, you wanna have this conversation because language is living and it's beautiful, and yes, it's supposed to help you understand, but it's also supposed to make you feel alive. So, to get a little poetic about it for a second, um, I think that's a really good place to wrap up. Reggie, thank you so much for being with me today.
Thank you, Rachel. I appreciate it.
What wine terms do you think are outdated? Tell us about it at podcast@wineenthusiast.net, and we might share your feedback on the podcast. We love hearing from you and appreciate your support. Please rate and review us wherever you listen to podcasts. Remember to visit us at wineenthusiast.com for content and products that bring your love of wine to life.